Okay, it is now my distinct pleasure to introduce our first guest speaker for today. Mr. Peter S. Lynch is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Energy, Installations, and Environment. He is the principal policy developer for and advisor to the Assistant Secretary of the Navy on Department of Navy safety program matters. He's also a retired Navy officer and member of the Navy Civil Engineer Corps with an extensive record of outstanding and significant assignments. He will give us today the perspective of the owner. Before I turn the podium over to him, I also want to give thanks to retired Rear Admiral Chris Mossy. Stand, please. He heads the Federal Facilities Council, and he did a lot of work arranging for Mr. Lynch to join us, so thank you, Admiral Mossy. This time, let me turn the podium over to Mr. Lynch for his presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good morning. Thanks so much for having me come today. I'm actually the principal deputy. I'm not acting the secretary. So that's a political position, and I'm not it. So I'm just a guy. But I really think this is a great venue, and I think the interaction that you're going to have today with the academia, you have a lot of industry experts, and then you have some government folks. I'm going to say a few things about the Department of the Navy, and I think you have some students that are here that are going to be kind of in their real understanding of what's going on and what they can see when they get out to the field. To echo Ed's comments, you do want to be engaged. You want to ask questions, and you want to interact with these folks that are going to be here. From the Department of Defense, our new Secretary of Defense has put out 3 strategic objectives for us. And the first one is to rebuild the warrior ethos, to make us a fighting force that is really based on everybody's got Avery's back, everybody's working together on a common objective, and we're working really, really hard to be that culture of warrior ethos. The second one is to rebuild our military with that kind of concept, make sure we have the right equipment, the right personnel, the right training, and they're operating safely and effectively. And then the third one is to reestablish that sense of deterrence. And again, we want to talk about that today too, because the idea of a culture where all these things come together. What is the adversary looking against the military to see? Is the United States kind of organized? Do we have our stuff together, right? Are we operating safely? Are we operating effectively? Are we working together as a team? So I want to give you a couple things to think about here as we go through this warrior ethos, this culture of safety. And I'm going to give you some examples of maybe we're not so much there. We're going to do some of this stuff through, building on our lethality. We're going to drive accountability, and everything's going to be merit-based. And then we're going to have rigorous standards, and we're going to focus on readiness. That's what the Department of Defense is supposed to be doing, right? We're here to fight America's wars and win them. We're not here to kind of, walk around and be tough, right? We're out here to do what we've got to do. And that mission is tough, right? It's hard, it's dangerous. And we're just going to talk about a subset of that has to do with the construction side and the things that we're building to enable that warfighting readiness. So from 2005 to 2025, within the construction just within Department of Defense, or Department of the Navy, actually, we had over 12,000 injuries. So you see these subset of the metrics that were just shown. And across the Department of the Navy's construction, we've had 21 fatalities. So about a death a year on Department of the Navy construction sites. And that's everything from felling a tree to building a building to have some sort of crane accident where we've had a mishap that killed somebody in a crane accident. So 1 a year, to your point, not acceptable. 1,000 a year for the industry across the nation, worse, but not good enough, right? So, the Navy's 1 per year is completely unacceptable. The cost impacts for the safety mishaps that have across the Department of the Navy, $763 million. $750 million of work that we could have been doing something else. We could buy another weapon system. We can put another radar on a ship. We can put another weapon system in the field. So that $763 million of lost things, those dollars are critical, and we can't afford to lose that kind of those dollars, that buying power. So they asked me to talk a little bit about the owner's perspective. I'll do that, and then also talk a little bit about the Department of the Navy. But from the owner perspective, and you'll hear this pretty much from every owner, right? money matters. So the cost of construction and the impact of safety mishaps is not inconsequential. $763 million over 20 years, that's a lot of money. Every dollar counts, and our environment is going to be tighter and tighter on the budget. So when we have a mishap and a safety loss, that's catastrophic for us. So we got to be really focused on the budget and the cost of construction site and the negative consequences that come with safety mishaps. The other issue is timeliness, right? The schedule is super important. And everything we do is tied to some sort of mission need date. It's tied to some sort of deployment schedule or some other kind of aspect that has a time element of that. And that is, again, there's never enough time to do the things that we need to do. And if we don't have a focus on the timeliness, then we're going to lose opportunities. And so when we have a mishap on a site, it stops the construction. You might have, if you have a serious mishap, the whole job site's going to shut down for some amount of time while there's an investigation and things like that. So again, that's not controlled time loss. That's not a scheduled delivery of something that's going to have some reason to reorient the construction site. That's just something that came out that had a negative consequence on the construction schedule and the cost. And then the last thing from our perspective, and again, I mentioned that warrior ethos and those kinds of things of building that culture of safety, is that reputational risk that you lose when you have an accident on a job site. And that reputational risk is significant. You'll never really gain that full trust with the community, the town, the municipality, or your client if you have a lot of mishaps or really any significant mishap. So that reputation you can never fully get back. And again, those big things from the owner's perspective, cost, schedule, and reputation are critical to the Navy. And so we want to make sure that we're focused on that as we move forward. And the culture of safety really has to start at the top of the organization. That's the unit commanders, that's the fleet commanders, that's everybody involved in the process. And as he mentioned earlier, it drives down to every individual on the job site needs to have that sense of safety culture is important. They wake up every day, they think about their safety culture. What are they doing today to make the job site safer? What are they going to do to instill that sense of culture and ownership for every individual in the organization? Across the Navy, we had some distractions, right? We had some mishaps that were pretty consequential. In 2017, we had two collisions at sea. Again, not construction-based, but again, what drives the safety culture change? We had the McCain, where we lost 10 people, and the USS Fitzgerald, where we lost 7 people. And these were both in the summer of 2027. And then in 2020, we had the Bonhomme Richard fire, which was a ship that was under repair, burned at the pier. Capital loss, the whole ship, pretty much burned to the waterline in old days of wooden ships. But that was a complete loss. Now, the McCain and the Fitzgerald both were repaired, but again, we lost 17 sailors because of those 2 accidents. So along the line, leadership, the helmsman, everybody on the ship somehow lost a little sense of that safety culture. So that was our Navy's, burning platform. What are we going to do to change? What do we do to drive a change in culture? Well, the first thing we did was we went out and benchmarked against academia. We benchmarked against industry. We talked to others and found out what are they doing that's better. How can we learn from industry? How can we learn from academia? How can we learn from organizations like this one? We focused really on Dow Chemical, on Alcoa. We looked at Delta Airlines, and we looked at Chevron. And we found some consistency across all those industries. And what do they start with? Well, culture starts at the top. If you're going to build culture, you've got to do that from leadership all the way down the whole organization. You got to provide top-level leadership. So for the Department of the Navy, we did 3 big significant things in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. The first one is one of the panel members will talk about this, but we used to have the Safety Center. It was a billet that was down in Norfolk. It was an organization that was well organized, but not really to the same status as a command. So we made it the Safety Command for Navy. So it's the Naval Safety Command in Norfolk. They do a lot of investigations for mishaps, and they do quite a lot of the training and efforts that goes into safety culture. So we made that a 2-star billet. So that's a pretty big investment. We also reestablished the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Safety. Oh, that's me. So it's a 3-star billet, essentially. I'm a civilian, but I'm an SES Tier 3. So it's a 3-star billet that's focused for the Department of the Navy for all safety. That's operational safety and shore safety. So construction is part of that, but also anything associated with, vertical lifts, any kind of crane work, any kind of thing on a ship, any kind of submarine issues, whatever. And then on the third side, the Marine Corps had a safety division that was run by a colonel, and they established a flag billet. So they have a general officer now in charge of their safety division. So across the Navy, Department of the Navy, we made 3 significant issues to bring leadership higher, focused on the Navy's culture. So those are pretty significant things for the Department of the Navy to do. We also got leaders out to the job sites. So you learn a lot when you walk the job sites. And those that are students out here, it's very easy to fly a desk. You spend a lot of time looking at RFIs, maybe looking at paperwork, reading papers, doing emails. But if you don't get out on the job site to really understand what's happened on a construction site, you don't quite get it. And you won't observe, you won't see the organizational structure that may or may not be working well. And you may or may not see the small things that go on in a job site. And as we had the diagram of Heinrich's pyramid, those small things matter. They really do. You learn from those. And so going out and seeing the job site is a big part of what our safety culture really needs to do. And then we drove some rigorous accident reporting. If you don't have data and information, it's really hard to make sweeping changes. And so a reporting system, a safety management system that includes data-driven analysis isn't really going to work very well. It's going to be based on anecdotes and not data. So developing a new system to make sure that you've got mishap information and classifications to really drive change. You can't do that if you don't have good data. So we established the safety management system. We have more of a plan, do, check, act kind of system. You've seen those kind of cyclical processes where you look at things, you change it, you see what happens, then you adjust again and you act again. So we did a lot of that for our safety management system. And then we restructured our risk management. And a lot of times we don't look at the risk management part of that on a construction site for things that are in your control, right? The management of the risk that you identify when it's got to do with a safety issue. If you can lower that probability and lower that consequence, then you're doing an effective risk management process. You really got to evaluate what those risks are and then move on and then make those corrections, observe, check it again, and try again. But again, that cyclical system and that risk management part was a big part of the Navy's program to reduce the safety or to reduce mishaps. We do have a safety program that I think is pretty noteworthy, and I wanted to just highlight it for just a few minutes. And it's the Navy Crane Center down in Norfolk. And the Navy Crane Center is responsible for the naval crane issues. That's the Marine Corps and the Navy operations, both ashore and the fleet. So what they focused on a lot is those same things I mentioned in terms of building that safety culture, to building that ethos of understanding the small things matter and reporting is essential. So they have a rigorous and very, very, very exhaustive method of reporting near misses. And with that, they've worked very hard at that base of Heinrich's triangle. And then they've avoided those pinnacle events, which are the top of the pyramid, right? You want to enjoy the benefits of focusing on the small, less consequential issues. A mishap that is, the pick didn't go up the way you wanted and it banged against, a column. Didn't hurt anything. Didn't hurt anybody. Didn't break the column and didn't have anything with the load. But it's still not anticipated, right? It wasn't part of the control. So that's reported as a near miss. So even though it has no consequence to the construction site, it's a learning opportunity. And so that's what they've really done very, very effectively. And they have changed their safety culture across the entire fleet. And the safety statistics bear that out, for the last several years. And so the Navy Crane Center has been a great success, focusing on rigorous reporting, sharing the information. So they have a very good campaign of communication across the fleet. And then it's all non-putative. So you don't get in trouble if you report something that went wrong. In fact, you celebrate that. So again, that's that culture that gets down to every individual and every person that is involved on the job site. So if you can do those kinds of things recurring and you build that data set and you can understand where those trends are, now all of a sudden your safety program is enhanced. It's getting better and you can see the numbers coming down. I'm not sure if it's the same that you're talking about, Ed, with the, taking it from 1,000 down to something smaller than that, cut it in half. But again, you start seeing those incremental changes over time, and now you've already got some success. I'm a little bit out of time, I think, too, because I think your next thing starts at quarter till. And the other thing that I was going to just hide out as a construction element that we focus on in my office quite a lot is prevention through design. And so oftentimes you'll see things where you have the common application of a ladder on a job site, 20-foot ladder, that cost to put that system in place might be $6,000. But the alternative that might be safer is 2 10-foot stairs with a landing. So instead of introducing this potential safety thing, this apparatus of a 20-foot ladder that has, retention devices, and you got to do some training on that, and then you could have a higher probability of accident. You can't move as much material up and down that ladder. But if you build a ladder, a stairway system where you have 2 10-foot flights and a landing in the center, the number of accidents goes down significantly, and the cost actually amortizes over time. So that ladder system that you put in place over the 5 or 6 or 8 years, will run you about $6,000. And if you put in a stairway system, the whole thing might cost you $15,000 to put in. So your initial response is, I'm going to go with the ladder system. But when you look at it over time, that ladder system is going to cost you about $15,000, more than twice, not uncommon. But the stairwell may only cost you, $30,000. I'm sorry, I got that flipped. But the stairway system, although more expensive at the beginning, the life cycle costs with the training and things are much more effective. So again, think about that in the design as you're going through the process, that you might see an alternative that comes up that's quicker, it might be easier, it might cost less, but over time, that cost will amortize and you actually will save money by putting in the ladder system. And that assumes you have no mishaps, right? But the chance of having a mishap on a ladder is much, much, much higher than putting in a stair. So it's just something to think about. So that's all I had to bring up for you. I appreciate the chance to talk to you all. And I think you're going to have a great day. And we actually have some, temperatures that are supportive of that. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry here. Yeah. Thank you very much, Peter, for coming. You absolutely hit on key topics relative to this whole subject of safety culture, leadership from the top, near-miss reporting, non-punitive follow-up to ensure that people learn from the incident as opposed to punishing people. So it's very encouraging to hear that the Navy's doing that, and we thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and come to talk to us today. We struck a coin
All right.
for the event, the Symposia series this year. Last year, NAC celebrated its 25th anniversary, so please accept that for.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you bet.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, you got it.